Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about IP cameras, also known as smart cameras for the home, also known as family cams, also known as baby cams. They come under a bunch of names, but from this point forward I'm just going to call them in the video IP cameras. They are cameras that function via the network and or the internet, and predominantly in today's video I want to talk about internal cameras. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to talk about some heavy PoE stuff that businesses like banks and shops use. This video is purely aimed at people that want to put cameras in their home or small office environment. Cameras like these that we've seen for a number of years that have evolved since the very late noughties. We have seen loads of cameras arrive on the scene, and I know on this channel I talk about network attached storage and its utilization with things like surveillance quite a lot, and of course that is going to be featured in today's video, but I'm going to try to stay generally on the subject of IP cameras, whether it's compatible with NAS or not. It will come up, but not as much. So, choosing the right IP camera for your home has got loads of factors to bear in mind. And now, just, heading over to Amazon or any store and just typing in the word camera for home or smart camera for home, you end up with quite literally thousands of results. And all these cameras look the same. For example, on the table here, I have 4 cameras that I've reviewed here on the channel previously. These 4 cameras here range from, at the bottom end, £25 to £30, to this one at the top, up to about £130 to £135 shopping around. So there's a difference of about £100 between these cameras. And I think it would be fair to say they look really similar. Where is that £100 going? Is this a case of this one costs more so it's better, this one costs more so it's better, and so on and so forth? Or is there more to it? Unsurprisingly, it is the second one. There is way more to it. Because chances are when you buy a camera, just because you go for the ones that are more expensive, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting a camera that's going to do what you want it to do to the best of its capabilities. There are a lot of budget cameras out there that actually give you quite a lot of bang for your buck in certain areas that might be very specific to you. So, let's talk about price first. Of these 4 cameras, which, let's face it, I haven't even mentioned who they are yet. This is the HemeVision HM203. It's a £30 budget IP camera for home. This is the Anker HD. It's a 1080p camera. Arrives again about the 40-50 quid mark if you shop around. This is the Reolink C1 Pro, and the C1 Pro retails for about £60 to £70. And this is the SimCam S1, a company that was doing some Kickstarter stuff, and this camera arrives again at about 130 quid. So, what is the difference between these cameras in terms of price? Well, the budget one, this gives you a camera that has a modicum of PTZ, known as pan, tilt, zoom, and that means that the camera can rotate on its base. It has a geared motor system inside, and that pan, tilt, zoom can be controlled and operated remotely. Now, the panning is the circular motion of the camera. In the case of this camera, it is 355 degrees. That means it can almost go a full circle, but then it hits at an end and it has to go around the other way. It does have an element of tilt, but not much. This camera has an internal socket, kind of like an eye, that can go up, but only for about 50 degrees. So not a huge amount of tilt there. Now, if we move up a stretch in terms of hardware, we look at the Anker. Now, the Anker has around about the same 355 degree rotation. In terms of pan, it can pan a great deal higher and lower than that first camera. It also arrives with some features that aren't available on this one. I'll talk about the software area, but in terms of hardware, these two are actually remarkably similar, despite a large price difference between them. Now, if we move up a level, we can go to what I think of as the prosumer bracket of cameras. So if you look at the Reolink here, this one has got, again, around about 355 degrees of rotation. It also has a great panning all the way to the top. It has enhanced wireless connectivity compared to this one, and I'll get to that later on too. And it is supportive in NAS server environments. So we move one step further up, we can look at the SimCam. Now this has 360 degree rotation, so that top will go all the way around non-stop, although it doesn't have any pan, any tilt, I should say. Now, that's an area where these three vendors have gone very different ways in terms of control. And control of a camera might make all the difference to you. So do always take note of the pan, tilt, zoom settings. While I'm talking about zoom, let's talk about digital zoom versus optical zoom. Now, with your mobile phones these days, when you take a picture or zoom in, you must have noticed when you zoom, it goes pixelated to hell. A number of you must have already clocked a reason for this, but for those that don't know, the difference is to do with optical versus digital zoom. Digital zoom is the equivalent of moving your head closer to something. It is just making a picture bigger, and it doesn't increase the pixelation. Some of them have smart scaling, but digital zoom will always just make the picture bigger. They'll dress it up, but that's effectively it. An optical zoom is like an SLR camera. It changes the lenses to create real zooming. So in the case of these cameras, this is the only one that has on this table optical zoom. So even though it's not the most expensive, it has the best zoom. I think it's 4 times optical zoom built into it. Something that if you're using a camera in the home and you use a tracking application or their own proprietary apps to monitor a burglar, you want to get a good look at their face, particularly during night vision, which is another thing we'll talk about later on. So do bear that in mind with zoom, that often the most expensive cameras, unless they are the top tier ones like Axis, where they cost like, we're talking £500, £600, £700 a go, optical zoom on home cameras is actually quite harder to find, and you very rarely find it at the more expensive ones, because what they put their money into these days is embedded AI. So that leads us neatly into features. Now, the features and functionality of these cameras you would think is near enough identical. They all record. You know, they're all a camera pointing in a corner of a room that are recording footage. But it's so much more than that. And depending on how you're going to use the recordings, these features and functionality will make a vast amount of difference. Not only at the point of capture, but at the point of retention and at the point of retrieval. So this time, we're going to start from the top end. All right? So first and foremost, we have that smart cam. This is an AI-powered camera. It can recognize faces, people, vehicles, objects, motion. It can track. It can also record faces and keep them on a database. So it can record when certain people enter its field of view. You can arrange for it to track people if you want. But say you want to know if someone's in your house who shouldn't be there, even if it's, you know, you've gone away, you've left your kids at home, not Home Alone style, way older than that. You've left them at home and you don't want them to bring someone over, you can set it up so if your kids are in the house, it won't alert. But if someone enters the field of view who is not on the database that you've recorded in this, it will alert you. On top of that, it also has support of an SD card slot on the rear, it can connect to a NAS, and it has a cloud service provider with it. So you can get a subscription service to back up on the cloud. So 3 different storage means, which is pretty good. Now, we move down a tier, in terms of price at least, onto the Reolink. Now, the Reolink arrives with an SD card slot as well. It also arrives with cloud support with Reolink as well. And it can also be supported by network attached storage. So again, tick, tick, tick. But it's not a smart camera. It doesn't have the ability to identify objects. It can't recognize faces. But if you're going to use a network attached storage device or an NVR, DVR, depending which one you want to go for in your setup system, that might already have smart AI backend anyway. You should check with that first. Things like the Synology DVA3219 or some of the more modern QNAPs that use QVR Face or Face Tiger as they call it. The result is that you might buy a camera that has that functionality, but you're not going to use it because your NVR or NAS already has it built in. So as good as this camera is, and it doesn't have the AI stuff unfortunately, you can make sure that the NAS or recording device you use has got it anyway. Now, some NAS brands allow you to take advantage of the hardware in the camera and let the camera do the work. But it's not always smooth sailing. And in often cases when I've used smart cameras like I did an overview of this, When I use the smart functionality of this camera, the only thing the NAS could use is the alerts. The NAS got the alert triggers from the camera, which I received, but the alert for motion detection and the alert for facial recognition and non-facial recognition were all the same. So it depends where you want the work to happen. Do you want it to happen on your NAS or your NVR, or do you want it to happen on the camera? It can make all the difference to your spending. Also, it's worth highlighting with the recording that one of the reasons people utilize AI-based IP cameras and AI-based surveillance is because it is easier and a great deal more profitable to have a camera that will know the difference between a room of 10 people that should be there and a room of 9 people who should be there and 1 person who shouldn't. Or if a car goes onto a driveway that it shouldn't be there. Or if someone puts a bag on a train station platform that shouldn't be there. Because what happens is, rather than having someone watching a camera feed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, all they have to view is the alert. What they get is just a condensed version where the camera knows what's important. So rather than give the other end user thousands and thousands of hours of footage to look through, you are handing them this small selection of notified alerts that are pushed to mobile, pushed to desktop and more. And then they can look at these instances and go, no point, no point, no point, no point, that's interesting. And they can flick through those in mere minutes compared with days and hours. So that's one of the cool features about them. Now, if we move to the other end of the spectrum, we can talk about non-smart cameras. These are cameras that kind of have default functionality. These cameras here have got movement tracking, they have got scheduled recording times, they have got the ability to record to SD card slots. All four of the cameras here can be utilized in a network environment as well as the internet. But with these brands here, they are not OnViv or NAS supported. OnViv is kind of a default state where cameras can be procured and accessed by default systems. These two have got it, these two don't. And a lot of cheap cams do not arrive with OnViv support. So not only do you have a camera that you can't connect to a third-party NVR system, but on top of that, the cameras themselves are not intelligent and hugely software-based off-site. In the case of these two cameras, you need to utilize a mobile app to really take advantage of them. Now, as good as that might sound and the utility and ease of it, these mobile apps are not user-friendly for the most part. I rephrase that, sorry, I take that back. They are user-friendly, but if you want to make more technical judgments and more bespoke surveillance setups, they are incredibly limited. On top of that, these two cameras heavily rely on users taking advantage of the third-party cloud storage they offer. They are cheap for a reason, because a lot of the time what you're paying for isn't so much the camera, it's the necessity of a subscription service to access the cameras remotely outside of your home and to store recordings offline. Both of them have SD card slots, but if you're going to spend the sort of money that a 128 gigabyte SD card slot is, I would argue put that money into a better camera than just a storage medium, because these cameras, you know, they don't really have the same retention policies about recycling recordings that you can configure very easily, and it's the old adage, you get what you pay for. They are good cameras, and if you're only looking for a budget solution that's going to be recording and you're going to be re-recording and recording over the same footage every few days, these are fine. But they are very limited in a broader sense. Remember, not just a lack of optical zoom, not just a lack of smart functionality, they are limited by their own internal software. Now, on the subject of limitations, we can talk about another bugbear of mine I've talked about here on the channel before. The support of 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz frequencies. All four of these cameras, when you set them up for the first time, let you set them up in one of two ways. Number one, you can connect them via RJ45 LAN on the rear. So you connect them to your local area network, to a switch or a router, and then from there, the device can then be picked up and accessed by the camera, with any luck, and set up for the first time. But the majority of you are buying these cameras to be set up in Wi-Fi. And even though you connect to them via the local area network, there isn't a lot of ease with these two to actually switch them to wireless and enter those wireless credentials on the LAN. You have to use a bunch of pairing between your mobile device and the camera. Case in point, when you want to set these cameras up for the first time, it is nightmarishly tough to do it with a device that is 5 gigahertz, and most modern phones are. So when you're connecting with them using a mobile phone that is 5 gigahertz, and these only utilize 2.4 gigahertz, it can sometimes lead to real difficulty setting the device up for the first time, something you don't get with these two because they are dual bands, they are dual frequency supported, and even though your router can see them, you still need to be able to point these two to your routers. Some cameras, like the Anchor, use an audio notification system where it feeds information from your mobile phone to the camera back and forth using audio bleeps, which sounds like 56k dial-up gone wrong. In the case of the Human Vision, you have to use a 3D barcode system and show your phone to the device, but it is not foolproof. And even the application I was using was nowhere near the latency or the fidelity that I would have expected, even at that budget range. So do bear in mind when you're setting up a camera for the first time, what is the frequency of the bulk of your devices and what is the frequency of the cameras you're going to utilize. It may seem like only a day one problem, but you'll be massively surprised how awkward and difficult it can be when it comes up repeatedly. Now, I talked about that word OnViv. OnViv and the ability to add cameras to an existing NVR network video recorder system or a NAS, that is nowhere near as common as it should be in the field of IP cameras. Remember, these two have got it, these two haven't. And although these brands do have other cameras that do support OnViv, you will notice that the same camera that supports OnViv will be more expensive because they know they are leveraging the access. Most people that buy an OnViv camera are buying an OnViv camera because they want to connect it to another system. They've already got their storage taken care of. They've already got a means to have a surveillance standalone, viewing window. They don't want to use the proprietary software. So the brand, despite you not using the software, actually increases the price often. So do bear in mind what you're going to be using an IP camera for, if you're going to be using their software or yours. Because if you're going to use your own, maybe stay away from this end of the table and move over here. Whether you're going to use Smart or Zoom or anything like that at all, bear in mind that the more expensive cameras give you more flexibility of how you can utilize them. Now, we've talked about pan tilt zoom, we've talked about OnViv, we've talked about wireless frequencies. We have talked about all the things to do with modern cameras that you would expect to consider when buying an IP camera. Let's talk about night vision, because night vision is one of the features that pretty much every camera says it offers. All of them. They say, yep, we got night vision. Woohoo! We got night vision. We've got LEDs coming out of the wazoo. They say that all the time, and it is true. Almost all IP cameras these days for the home have got night vision. However, night vision is a scale. There is more to it than just knocking around with a saturation and the black-white filter. Real night vision on cameras, reliable night vision at that, requires a number of LEDs. You'll notice that the more expensive cameras will talk more about their LED focus. They'll also talk about intelligent motion detection, which I'll just touch on in a moment, but they do talk about night vision and LEDs a hell of a lot. The reason is that the LEDs pick up more light than the standard focal point. They are used for judging distance, and they are used for judging how things move. The more LEDs that a camera has, the better it can detect not only motion at night, but the night vision itself. You may notice one of these cameras, if the light went out, all of these cameras would switch on if they were plugged into night vision mode. They would detect with an IR sensor and the LEDs, the light suddenly drop in this room, and when they do that, all the LEDs would light up. Of all of these cameras, you'll be unsurprised to know that as you go further along the table, there are more infrared pods as you spend a little bit more money, because they need to be more precise in the smart functionality and in all of those alerted triggers. And of course, when it comes to night vision, definitely motion detection, particularly tracking as well, more IRs make the difference. Now, I talked about smart motion. A lot of cameras, once again, will say they do motion tracking. They'll do a picture of a ball with an after effect or something behind it. And that is useful, don't get me wrong. But a smart camera is only as smart as it understands what motion is. And if you put a camera near a window and there's a gust of wind and a leaf goes by the window, chances are these two cameras will trigger an alert. These two won't. The reason is because of smart triggers. It's telling the difference between a moving tree and motion. The idea that it understands the difference between a large degree of motion and a small one, and what is real motion and what isn't. Don't get me wrong, the DVA, the deep video analysis camera, the AI one here, obviously has an extra bit inside its big brain to take care of that. But that's something that this one doesn't have smart motion, doesn't have AI embedding, but it does have smart motion inside. These have only got the ability to heighten or lower the sensitivity. They have night vision, but in terms of triggering and smart movement and day and night time, these will leave you severely wanting. So you have to decide when you want the cameras to be operating. When's the priority point? If it's an office during the day, maybe you want this one, because then you can know who's using an office and environment, and if things are moved, as well as at night time having intelligent tracking. But if it's a baby monitor, these two are fine. If it's a baby monitor in your home, they are great. But just remember that to use SD cards rather than the proprietary software, because it does feel often, and this isn't an antagonistic statement, I hope, most users, when they use an IP camera and they're using the mobile phone apps that they arrive with, they feel a bit dodgy. And I wish there was a better way to put it, but they really do. They either feel like they feel very unsafe, or they give that vibe that you're giving a lot of information here on an app that seems to have very poor grammar, that seems to have images that are loading wrong, and you're dealing with a product that you just have an inkling doesn't feel as safe as it should. And although a lot of that is to do with branding and marketing and very ethereal values, you definitely get the impression when using these with your own proprietary hardware that it just feels safer than moving to this one. And that's kind of important when you're talking about security in pretty much every measure. Now, there is so much more to talk about in terms of IP surveillance, and I'm going to be doing a video just like this for outdoor cameras featuring stuff like IP666768, weatherproofing, and of course, power over Ethernet, PoE, in later videos. You don't really see much internal PoE, but it's out there in Dome and stuff like that in the banks. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, do let me know and click like in the description below. And of course, if you want to stay tuned on more things to do with IP cameras, whether it's an IP camera for the home, a business, for NAS, or any NVR system, then do click subscribe, because I do videos like this quite a lot. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.